And we were just having a crack at him being chaired off, but Tom Stewart's my number one. He might have been chaired for 150, but that performance and the career that this guy is building is off the charts. Chris Scott isn't prone to going over the top with his comments either. He's very measured. So to say it might be the best 150 games, I think it's not without merit. Tom Stewart, if he continues on this path, and he's been as consistent as anyone, drafted in 16, played his first year in 17, his first All-Australian was the next year, and since that, to be All-Australian in your second year, and he was a mature age player, so he's 25, 26 in his first All-Australian year, but he's only missed out the once in the COVID year in 2020. He's a phenomenal footballer. It's actually worth throwing up whether he could be the best player in the game, because
right now.
Well, yeah. It's worth putting him.
I'm not offended by that.
And even the fact that you're not offended by it says that's giving him his flowers, isn't it? Because he's so powerful in the air, so difficult to stop. Now, Pedler was assigned to him. He took 3 contested intercept marks in the first quarter. They did change tactics, and they probably could have done more. But
Bucks, when you say they changed tactics, to what?
They decided that
they leave him free.
Yeah, they wanted to use the extra player up the field and try and find targets. They had the wrong blokes kicking the ball inside 50. They had 66 inside 50s for 9 marks. So Adelaide had plenty of supply but didn't look after the last kick, which was actually some of them they should have hit. But Stewart, his speed and power to position himself, it's the off-ball stuff. I reckon if you're a midfielder playing against Geelong, you look up. Tom Stewart's probably the first player that you're going to see in your vision, because he gets to that spot before any forward does, before anyone else does. So that makes him a great defender. He defends the space. So it's not the possessions that he wins, but the possessions that the ball doesn't even come into his area because he's defended the most dangerous space. So I just think he's been an amazing story. He deserves, and it was a great celebration of his career to date, and it started late. It's 150 games old. If he does this for another 100, it'll be amazing. I'd be really interested to see where he finishes, because amongst all sort of general defenders that have ever played the game, he's got to be having as much impact as anyone.
Yeah, straight to the Australian Football Hall of Fame. If he doesn't play another game, he's a Hall of Famer, which is extraordinary. It's one of the best footy stories that I can remember. Just a word on Geelong.
Yeah, I've underestimated them again. Well, not again. They're pretty. They've been hard to underestimate. But I thought that they might struggle this year. But yeah, we should unpack that a little bit more in the next couple of hours, because I think they're looking very good.
We'll definitely do that. A bit of biff on Saturday night. How'd you see the Sydney Essendon stuff?
Yeah, loved it. I thought it was a great game, very physical. But I don't mind the Essendon edge. But when you've just bested them, you're going to get comments like this from a guy like Tom Papley, who is not going to take a back step that way.
Wasn't premeditated.
No, I don't think it wasn't. But I don't think there was a lot of premeditated stuff in what Essendon were doing. If you want to carry yourself with a little bit of niggle, let's call it niggle. Like you played all of your games niggling your direct opponent, trying to make it more difficult to play the game and to have it on your terms. And that's a pretty good place to start, because you want to disrupt the opposition as much as you want to go and do what you want to do. But I thought across the board, Essendon, I was impressed by them. I think they were beaten by a really good opponent, and I think Sydney will show up a lot of teams. They were still able to score 100 points, Essendon. Stringer and Gresham in that front half with Langford and their tools. I think that Menzies I don't mind as a small player. I think Durham, Hobbs and Perkins are 3 young players who are going to come through really well. And as I said earlier, I thought Merritt's performance was next level. I think he's just getting better and better as a player.
How concerned are you about their inability to defend transition? And you may say, because we had this discussion off air, well, Sydney, not many can stop it, but Hawthorn also got a hold of them from back transition last week, and this has been an issue for a long time. They can't stop transition.
Yeah, well, no side's been able to stop Sydney transitioning so far this year, and they have moved the ball really sharply by hand or foot. There was one contest or one transition that highlights it. Sam Durham missed a ground ball, and it was a 2-goal swing. It was late in the third quarter, and the Bombers were coming. So Durham misses the ground ball, and Blakey ends up taking a mark, with 20 metres on his own and nails the goal, and then McLean kicks the next one from a centre bounce. So that contest alone, yes, they allowed another goal end to end because Durham missed that one, but sometimes it just comes down to basics and getting that done. Like he was 1v3, but he had a play on it to go the other way, and Essendon would have scored, I reckon, going the other way. We're seeing that happen more and more in the game, these 2-goal swings, because a player either does or doesn't make that play. That's how marginal the game is, but also how you can get these wild swings in momentum when you get 2 or 3 of those together.
Okay, you said you're impressed with Essendon, but little quiz here for you now.
Yep.
Do they win or lose these games? So I'll read you out their next 5. Do they beat the Saints at Marvel?
That's going to be a 50-50 game.
Port Adelaide in Adelaide?
No, I wouldn't.
Western,
but they beat. I think they beat them there last year.
Western Bulldogs.
Well, the Essendon won their gather-round game, I think, last year. Yep.
Western Bulldogs.
I would have them as slight favourites for that.
We would. Adelaide in Adelaide.
50-50.
And then Collingwood at the MCG. So you didn't tell me if they win or lose.
No.
You said that a lot of 50. But
No,
what I'm saying is the next 5 weeks is a real challenge for them.
I think that I still think the Bombers have got a way to go. But there's the whole idea of professional standards in pre-season and the whole idea of being a physical player. They're 2 pretty good things to build on. And I don't like an opponent like Papley is going to question. They've got to do it for 4 quarters, and they do. But they had some young boys that really stood up.
Yeah,
and
it's good stuff. It's just good stuff both ways.
But the other thing is they've had some experienced players that I believe haven't been physical enough or haven't stood up in the big moments enough. And I actually wasn't disappointed with what I saw.
All right, let's move on to maybe the best ruckman in the game at the moment.
Yeah, Luke Jackson. What an amazing game we saw him play. And he had 6 kicks, 24 touches. So he had 6 kicks.
Perfect.
And he's clear. And he had a 35 possession midfielder next to him, but he was clearly the best man on the field. And I thought that, a performance like that says this is why we chased him. This is what we've got to look forward to, and I reckon it's all upside. Well, most of the stuff is probably and is not radio highlightable because it's the little things he's doing. That follow-up ruck work that he does so well, and a heads up on that. Follow-up ruckman and their ability to clear the ball, they are, as a percentage of scores from clearances at the moment, they are having more impact on stoppage scores than any of the midfielders. So the hit-outs, don't be looking for hit-outs from your ruckman. Be looking for the ability to be able to follow up and clear the ball, because you naturally create an outnumber because your other ruckman's probably on his ass. So you create an outnumber, and that's what starts the chain for stoppage.
What do you do with
scores.
Sean Darcy? Just play him in the waffle for a bit? Or?
Yeah, well, I'll get to that. That's going to come back. But you've got an embarrassment of riches. That's great. But you've got Luke Jackson, who I think doesn't necessarily need to be in the ruck. He can play as a key forward.
I'm not sure about that.
He'll like if they're getting enough ball in the front half, that's where you want him. That's where the gap. That's where you need to win those contests.
We're just talking about him being the best ruckman potentially in the game, and his follow-up ability and his ability to start scoring
chains ruckman
from
in
the
general.
ruck. And now you're going to take him out of the ruck and put him forward, and he's not a forward. So anyway, that's a dilemma they can address later. His
performance was next level. So he only had 21 hit-outs. 5 tackles with a follow-up, but 24 disposals. But yeah, he really is a prototype tall player.
Ruckman. That's what he is. But he's a ruckman.
Hey, and let's. I'm going to come back to this commentary about best 22s. But he's a great asset to the Dockers.
How do you see your old side?
Right. I'm going to come out in defence of Nick Dacos preemptively.
Surprise.
No, preemptively. But at the same time, I'm going to throw him a challenge, because I think that there's going to be some misconceptions about the way that he defends as such, or how he invests in the defensive elements of the game. But clearly, the Pies have got some work to do. Collingwood have been a side that have handled momentum as well as anyone since Craig McRae's been coach. We're talking about momentum in game, but there's momentum in season. And Geelong have been a side who I believe have been able to control momentum in season as well as any. This is a challenge for Collingwood because they haven't been in this position. Craig McRae hasn't been in this position before. He hasn't been in a position of having to defend his players as such or defend performance. And it takes energy, it takes focus. And they've also got to work out, okay, what is the fundamental thing we need to focus on here? What amongst the 100 things that we think we could improve, what are the 2 or 3 that we're going to really focus on and narrow down on? So that's the challenge that Craig McRae and Collingwood have. Nick Dacos, his pressure rating last year was 6th at the club. So his ability to put pressure on the opposition was 6th at the club. And for instance, Jordan De Goey was 10th, so as a midfielder. His pressure ranking this year has gone up a third. So it's a third higher, and he's third at the club for pressure on the opposition. He's the highest Corella, if you understand. So it's perceived pressure. He's the third highest chaser. He's the second highest closer, and he's the highest implied and 4th highest physical. So he's up there in terms of.
Why do you feel the need to preemptively defend him?
Because I've seen and heard questions about his buy into the defensive elements of the game. I would encourage anyone that watches. It's harder to see on the TV, but anyone that watches the game, watch his 3rd, 4th, 5th efforts to go and put pressure on the opposition. He's a ball player, so he's not a natural. He's not the best tackler. Because the best tacklers are prepared to lose their feet to stick that tackle. He's a ball getter, so he won't lose his feet to stick a tackle, and it means that his tackle efficiency isn't quite as good as it could be. I don't know if you ever want Nick Dacos to go and lose his feet, because one of his greatest attributes is keeping his feet to be the outnumber at the next contest.
So that's fine, and everything you said is accurate. But if Nick Dacos is fumbly in traffic, or if he misses a clear fundamental tackle like he did on Mitch Owens, if he's not strong enough when the pressure is coming and he looks a little bit jumpy, I think that he's open to criticism.
Yeah, that's not the defensive elements, though. I think there was a couple of 50-50 balls that he spoke about it. There was one. How's this? There was one in Brisbane
last year,
early in the year,
and you interviewed him.
Yeah, and so we're talking about a young player who's finding his way in the caper, who's come in at that level, and we're finding one contest. So I look, he's clearly, we all know he's been an amazing story coming in and playing at the level that he's playing. I think his effort cannot be questioned.
No, I don't think anyone's questioning his effort, but when we praise him as much as we do, and he is one of the best players in the game, he is equally open to criticism. And that's
yes,
I think that's
agreed.
all anyone is saying. They're not saying he's not, look at his second efforts aren't good enough. They were saying, is he strong enough in the contest when the heat is on? And he wasn't on Thursday night, and I think that is open to criticism.
There was a Windhager contest ground ball where that was a 50-50 ball, and Windhager made it a 60-40 and then ran away with it. So that's what the challenge I would put to him is his tackle efficiency. He was tackling at 65% last year. He's tackling at under 50 this year. So when you get your chance to tackle, you've got to stick those tackles, and that might be one of the little things that Craig McRae is talking about.
He's not alone. He's not alone with the fumbling stuff.
And that game on Thursday night is just going to be an absolute beauty.
Your last point?
The last one I'm going to talk about. Let's not get carried away with best 22s or talking about in the best 22. So Jackson McRae, he went and got 47 touches in the twos. If he's going to help the Bulldogs be their best, he'll be there when the whips are cracking, and it's all about finding out. Duncan and Atkins. Duncan comes out late. Atkins isn't in the middle. Clark stands up, and you've got different players that get it done for Geelong through the middle. The team that we hear it a lot about, best 22, is Adams going to be best 22 for Sydney? We've got Parker out. We've got Mills out. Where are they going to fit in? Is Heaney going to leave the midfield? What a great position for a coach to be in. Ridley and Redmond go back into Essendon, as we were talking about them. The and Luke Jackson,
Crouch at St Kilda.
They're all there. If you don't have depth, if you don't have players outside the 22 that are playing this week that aren't injured, that you don't that can't come in and you're questioning whether they could actually make you better, you've got a skinny list. So the fact that you've got players, that sides have players outside of the 22 on that week, I don't think we sort of go to, are they going to get back in or what's going on there? Hey, don't worry about it. Having that depth of talent is crucial and important, and it's definitely a problem that you want to have as a coach. What do you think of Hawthorn's tactics early in that game?
Yeah, well, I think it's reflective, and you would be able to speak better than most on this. When you have a focus as a playing group, and particularly a young playing group, that would be to deny Melbourne possession of the ball, to possess it, to not give them the opportunity to have the footy, to take it away from Lever and May behind the ball, and then the young players just take it to the extreme. So you give them one message, and they completely probably put 40 to 50% on top of the way you wanted it exactly to play out. That's what can happen with young groups. But yeah, they got their tactics wrong, didn't they?
Yeah, and the balance wasn't right, and that's right. When you don't feel like you have the weapons either to best the opposition. It's sort of how much are you trying to disrupt the opposition versus just trusting your game and the way.
Should they have the weapons though?
It's the first time that I've seen sort of Hawthorn or Sam Mitchell go down that path. I think they've just played.
Yeah.
They've just played for the most part with him, and yeah, it is when you do over adjust it, it's jarring. You can see that, but I thought Melbourne's Cosy Pickett early, a couple of his finishes he showed, and getting up in the centre bounce here and there, but Petrarca, he was next level. That going back that bit of play when he went back and put the spoil in, that's good to see. There's a good. Well, I thought there was a good feeling at Melbourne at their last practice match against Carlton, and then they got done by Sydney, and then you can see now that sort of beating Sydney's going to be pretty tough. So they're in good shape, the D's.
The extension for Matthew Nicks prior to the Geelong game, and it now means that there are no coaches out of contract, and all clubs, and I had this discussion with Jared on Friday night, all clubs are now signing their coaches 12 months probably before they need to. Is the point, and I asked this question, where coaches should just be on staff? I know Carlton tried it a little bit. What's the point of a contract now when everyone is essentially signed up 12 months out from where they need to be?
Who's saying where they need to be?
Well, why did Adelaide need to extend Matthew Nicks? Why is there no coaches coming out of contract? Why does Michael Voss get re-signed? Why does Longmuir get re-signed? Why does Nicks get re-signed? Why does Ratton get re-signed and then moved on? Like, it's just the way that it is now. It's just the landscape, and everyone copies everyone now. They're not prepared to go into a season of football with a coach out of contract and the pressure that puts on the footy club. So should they just be on staff?
Just trying to make your job a little bit harder, mate. So we haven't got anyone.
But it's not going to
anyone to death ride.
It's not going to do that, is it? It's still. I mean, if Adelaide start 0-6, we're still going to be talking about the future of Matthew Nicks.
I think
the job.
I think the job of CEOs and boards is to give, and anyone that's in a leadership position, is to give the people that are leading and managing the best chance to succeed.
So should that be on staff as a coach? And
no, I think that the contract decisions is a part of giving their team, the people underneath them, the best chance to succeed. So it's actually giving the senior coach the best chance to succeed. I think it's really important to have stability at the top. The CEO, the president, the footy manager and the senior coach are seen as the primary roles, and they require stability. I think you're all in on all of those roles until the day you're not, and then you're out. And I think it's being in limbo is no good. So if you are in limbo, you've got two choices. You either make the call today, and very few, none of the clubs that have their coaches are making the calls today, or you provide them with stability and run me through an environment that is going to find success.
This scenario where Fremantle, let's just play it out. Fremantle finish, they have a reasonably solid year. They play to about expectation. They finish 9th. Then we're in. We're in January. Let me ask the question.
Hypotheticals.
No, let me ask the question, because it's a pretty realistic hypothetical that Fremantle have a solid year. They don't quite make it to the 8 and they finish 9th. And now we're in January next year, and they have missed the finals for 2 years. They make some off-season moves. They maybe get a couple of players in, and Longmuir's out of contract at the end of that season. Do you re-sign him again for another year? What do you do?
Depends how they get to ninth. There's plenty of different ways how you get to ninth.
Well, I'm just suggesting that they won't allow him to go into another year coming out of contract, so they extend him again, and is that the right move? Because if they miss the finals for a third year in a row, it's probably not. Anyway, the question is, are you just better to be on why? What's the benefit of a contract?
Another 12-month extension at the same time next year would be unlikely because it would be totally different circumstances. There'd be 12 months more information. And some of that we would be privy to. It'd be win-loss, and some of it we wouldn't be privy to because it'd be under the surface. And I think that's ultimately you do get measured on your success over a long period of time. Justin Longmuir's win-loss is over 50%. He's had some really good periods with that group. He's had some significant periods of great football, and he's lost a lot of players along the way. Now, whether that's him or whether it's the club, but they're the people in the best position to make these decisions. And just
Are they like Gold Coast with Stewie Dew? Are they in the best position to extend? Are they the best people to decide this? Why?
They're the only ones with all the information.
Yeah, but they don't always get it right. Is the Saints the right ones to extend Brett Ratton and then sack him a couple of months later? Are Gold Coast the same? I'm not sure. Matthew Nicks, could they have waited till round 10?
But ultimately they made those calls, didn't they?
But they didn't make them. That wasn't the right call.
Well, they were all the way with Ratton until they weren't.
Yeah.
They were all the way with Stewie Dew until they weren't. That's the way it needs to be. You can't be caught in limbo. You've been pretty hard on Bevo, like through the pre-season, and you'll go them when they don't perform. How did you view their performance, and do they deserve a bit of credit?
Excellent question. Because I've been reflecting on that. Thought they were enormous. I thought it was a really strong performance, but it's sort of in line with my frustrations around them because consistently they've been unable to replicate that, and I don't know why. I don't know why they can produce a performance like that, a full four-quarter performance. From the minute that game started, they win the first centre bounce, take it forward, they kick a goal, they win the next one, and you're like, right, they are switched on, and I knew it was going to be a really difficult day for Gold Coast early. So, absolutely credit for where it's due because that was a commanding performance, and that was a performance that I sit back and go, this team can win the premiership this year.
Really?
But then I see what I saw last week, and then what I see for the last 2 years where they cannot replicate that consistently, and you're not going to win every week. I know, I understand it's a tough game. So that is in line with my frustrations around this team because they've got everything that they need to win the premiership, yet they cannot do it consistently. And I need to see more. I just need to see more of it.
I'll have to do a little bit more, dig a little bit deeper, but I read somewhere that they had more intercept possessions or marks
28
than they've ever had.
28 they took
in their history. Like that, so pretty much. So that's a fair effort, and for a team. But if you're playing, they kick 9 goals in the first quarter, they got a big breeze, and they make the most of that. Then you allow your undersized defence to actually play on the front foot. That's not a question. The challenge for the Dogs is when you come up against the best sides, your defence has to play off the back foot. And we're seeing that with Collingwood at the moment as well. And Collingwood's inability to defend their back third. So you're going to have to defend off the back foot. That's the question I've got with the Dogs at the moment.
I would still play Darcy back. Because you've got Jones took 7 rows and 7 marks. Sam Darcy, it's just perfect. It just solves such a problem for them. I know they want to ruck him as well, so it's difficult to do that from back.
But the other thing is this is why I think we jump to conclusions. Like we're only, or we go early.
That's our job.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, it is. It's to call what we see rather than necessarily projecting.
Do you think
the Western Bulldogs staff,
Norton and Darcy, is a long-term solution in that? You don't think that's too tall?
Well, the second ruck will often play forward. If you can work out a way, coaches everywhere across Australia have been working out how you can have a second ruckman that comes from behind the ball because sometimes you feel like you're too tall in front of the ball. St Kilda solved it by rucking a half-forward flanker in Mitch Owens, but you can, but in the end what the Western Bulldogs coaching staff will work out is what do we need, and they'll work it out by rolling out what they think is their best fit and then adjusting as they go along. So that's what home and away. Seasons of 4. So you can find your best when you get to a final series.
Where do you sit on tackling now? Because I know you've touched on this before, but when is it important and when is it not? Because the Richmond game yesterday, what stood out was a lack of any pressure from the Tigers, and to be fair, Port Adelaide for stretches of that game where Richmond slingshot the ball and Port Adelaide couldn't stop it. But Richmond laid 32 tackles in that game. They had 6 players who didn't lay a tackle, and the pressure was at times non-existent. Does it matter or not?
Yes, it does. Philosophically, I've always been a high at-ball pressure coach. I'd prefer to see that, and I think that's so important to set up your layers behind the ball in your defence. But then the flip side of that is the Giants in their first 2 rounds, the first 2 quarters of the first quarter of their first 2 rounds, they had 5 tackles against Collingwood in the opening round and put 6 goals on the board, and they had 6 tackles in the first quarter of the round 1 game and put 7 goals on the board. So but it is a balance. You're not always going to be on your front foot, so you've got to be able to tackle and defend and put pressure on the opposition when they have their chance to score or when they have their run on. So I have got a big query on Richmond. There's no doubt that there's a change of coaching philosophy, and there needs to be, from Hardwick to Uze. And Uze's may not have. I sort of sensed it in the Gold Coast game, the opening round game. There was contests that I saw Richmond players not as intense at that I normally would, that we've come to expect and to be used to. So when you
that wouldn't be a coaching instruction, though.
Well, you actually it can be a coaching impact by omission.
Right. How?
If you're focusing on ball movement and how we want to set up at a contest, or how we want to team defend even, but you haven't actually coached the combative elements. And Damien Hardwick coached raising the fight, which was at ball pressure. He coached that relentlessly. And as soon as you don't coach it, it's not front of mind. You do get a change in behaviour and action. So I'm not in the Richmond inner sanctum.
Most coaches that speak go contest, pressure defence, don't they? That's what we hear.
Can say whatever you like, but what are the drills that you've been doing through pre-season? Because that's what the players, that's what they will roll out when they get in situations in a game. If you haven't practiced it, if it hasn't been front of mind, if it hasn't been focused on, it's not going to come out in that moment. Even guys that have it intrinsically in them to be combative tackling machines, for instance, if you haven't been in that position through a preseason as often as you normally have been in the past, well, then it will reflect.
All right, I got a couple of quick fire ones for you, Bucks, because I thought Jack Lukosius was excellent last year, 39 goals. But now we find himself in a situation where they don't know where to play him again. Jed Walter plays his first game. He's going to be the future. You've got King, who's going to be the future. Lukosius plays back yesterday. Is he back or forward, and where is he at in his career?
Well, he's a forward. He's actually, I think he's actually established and found some, was settled as a forward, and he's actually started playing some really good footy. He was still not dissimilar to a Charlie Curnow who might kick 3 goals in 6 minutes to separate a game and then go dormant for a little while. That's what Lukosius was doing, and he was kicking 2s and 3s in runs and then struggling to impact in other parts of the game. But that might not be enough for what Damien Hardwick and the coaching staff are looking for.
So look at it and go Geelong, Cameron, Hawkins, Henry, Gold Coast, King, Walter, Lukosius. Is that not the perfect 3?
And because he uses the ball so well, I mean, I think Lukosius is closer to a Gunston than he is a Cameron. Like he's Jeremy Cameron. He's
an Ollie Henry sort of type, isn't he?
Well, he's taller than that, but when you look at his traits, he's not a player who welcomes the contest. He's not overtly physical like a Walter looks to be, and that might be the type. Damien Hardwick might just see in Jed Walter, you might see Tom Lynch, and you know, say, oh, and I think you do get like this as a coach. You go, okay, this is this is the best team that I've built. I want to try and replicate that in some shape or form because I know what I can put that one in and then build the rest around it. But Lukosius has got great skills. He sees the game really well. Don't rely on him to be the bloke that puts his head over the ball and comes 100 miles an hour from the opposite direction. That's not his elite skill. That's not his standout trait. But he's got some very good traits that can be utilised. And I think, potentially it's floating up through the midfield as that extra forward and then sliding down to hit the scoreboard when he can.